Life is a story, and what we do with it is what matters. We have some opportunity and we have some options, but we have to start telling our story in a positive light and not a negative lens. We often identify ourselves, if we have a chronic condition, by the chronic condition, and that's not helpful and it's limiting. So I wanted to talk about some change in that area. I hope this video brings some light and hope to the idea that we can change the way the world views us by changing the way we view ourselves. We can't make people do differently, and we can't make people see things that they refuse to see, but we can do our part in hopes that it will make the difference. It only takes a little bit to make some kind of change. So let's start that conversation. Let's start sharing our story the way we want it told. Hey there! I was sitting here in the sunshine enjoying having a cup of coffee, and I thought I would share with you guys a thought that I don't think I've mentioned yet. When making this channel, I had an idea about the reality of each of us having our own story to tell, and that it is our own to define, and there are things that impact the chapters and the way we experience our story, but I wanted to share some thoughts about this. So here's the explanation of the name of my channel, A Story Rewrite. Having a chronic condition means oftentimes we have plans that end up deferred or completely canceled. And I don't mean social plans, I mean dreams, larger plans, life hopes, things that we had hoped to do or accomplish. And oftentimes these end up canceled totally. The chapters in our book that we had foreseen being written about these things, maybe a dream career or a dream opportunity that we have built our life toward, is then pulled from the pages of our book, and it's painful. Oftentimes these chapters are not necessarily pulled totally from the book. Maybe they're moved to a later date, and we have to adjust to the reality that it's not going to happen when we thought or how we thought. And then sometimes as life changes, the pages that we were writing or we hope to see in our future are not relevant anymore, or they're not applicable to the journey we're on, and maybe we cancel those ourselves and write new pages and dream new dreams. I personally have plenty of those chapters that I can identify I had once dreamed or planned for or hoped to experience that have been removed. And then I have chapters that I never knew were coming. I never knew would be part of my story, and I'm so grateful that they are, because they make me who I am. I named my channel A Story Rewrite to highlight hope. It's been a challenging week, and I've had to remind myself of maintaining my focus on the positive. Does that mean that I don't grieve the loss, or I don't grieve the challenges and I don't deal with those? Absolutely not. Grief is important to process through, but it's not a place you want to stay. It's like a pit stop on the way to a destination or on your journey. It's not a place to pull in and park and stay at all. So we often think of our lives or our person in thin descriptions, in ways that do not encompass the entirety of who we are as a person. These are examples such as I'm a bad person or I'm not good enough. And these provide these negative labels, this painful experience that we then define ourselves by, or we allow others to define us by. We give others the power to look at us and define us in an encounter, in a few encounters, chance meeting, or maybe they've even heard about us from someone else, and then we allow them to then define us. And it's not helpful. Labels are not generally helpful in that way. anything that's a generic or broad term that defines us or we use to define us is a thin storyline. We are so complicated and complex as people that we can't be described in one word or in a few words. We have layers upon layers that really define who we are, that really encompass who we are. And to give a brief description of ourselves really leaves out so many important factors of who we are and what we're about. There's a quote I would like to share with you by J.M. Barrie, and let me just read it so that I don't get it incorrect. He said, "The life of every man is a diary in which he means to write one story and writes another." We're always adding to the story of who we are. I really like this quote because we have this idea about ourselves, and the idea when it's all laid out is usually far from what we imagined it to be. In some ways, this is a really great thing. In some ways, we encounter ourselves in a way that we never imagined that we would. For me, I have thought I've known myself, and then I discover something totally new that is beautiful and exciting, and I get to experience life through a new lens. I think you probably have encountered thickening of your storyline. When I say thickening, I mean adding new, more appropriate descriptions of ourselves, in the sense of not saying I'm a bad person. Are you a bad person all the time, every waking moment? No. Do we all do things that are not good? Sure. But in every day in itself, we have moments where we're lots of things, and bad is not a descriptor that we can use to define every action. We are multifaceted beings, meaning there may be things about myself that I don't like, but there may be many, many things that are wonderful and that I enjoy about myself. But I don't always focus on those things because I'm sort of conditioned by society, by my life, whatever the system I come out of, the system I'm presently in, conditioned to look at and highlight within myself the negative. I think a sense in our society is that we encourage this type of unhelpful behavior, or we support it through our own labeling of others and ourselves, and modeling behavior is a means to maybe keep pride down in a negative way. I think maybe it's a false sense of humility, that we don't get too full of ourselves. I'm not quite sure, but I do know that it's not helpful. We have to focus on what we want to see more of. Let me share a second quote with you. I'll read it again so I don't get it wrong. This is by John Lubbock. He said, "What we do see depends mainly on what we look for. In the same field, the farmer will notice the crop, the geologist the fossils, botanist the flowers, artist the coloring, sportsman the cover for the game. Though we may all look at the same things, it does not all follow that we should see them." So essentially he's saying our lens, our perspective, the way we view the world and the things that we're looking for is what we're going to find. If I want to look for support to prove to myself that I'm a bad person, or I'm a burden, or I'm not good enough, I'll find the evidence and I'll use that evidence to support my belief system about myself, which is negative. But then in the same vein, if I want to believe positively about myself, I have to look for the evidence and then use that evidence to support my theory that I am a fill in the blank, whatever. There's a lot that can be said about this, and I could go on. I really like this topic a lot, or I wouldn't have named my channel the way I did. But I wanted to start a conversation about our stories, about the reality that it is our power to share what part of our story we want to share. That's a boundary thing, right? So nobody else is allowed to, without our permission, to share our story. Do they? Sure they do. You can't help what other people do. However, you can boundary yourself to know that what you're giving them is safe to give away, or they're trustworthy to not give it. So how are you going to describe yourself? And how are you going to identify supportive information, supportive evidence in your life that supports the things that you identify yourself as, the way you talk about yourself, the way you share about yourself, and those little offhand comments that we often say, such as you do something, you knock something off, oh, I'm so stupid, or there's something that seems to be obvious to someone else that you've overlooked, oh, I'm so dumb. These comments are not helpful. They support the negative thinking. They support the unhelpful labels that we keep ourselves knocked down with. So we have to start somewhere. I want the story that is shared about me to promote the me that I am, not the way other people have developed some thinking about me that's not helpful. If I don't like what's being said about me by me, it's my responsibility to change it. You gonna brush my hair? So we have to thicken our narrative. That's what I'm describing here. So the way we think is the way we will behave, if you want to get a little CBT on things. Identifying new elements in our life, in our story, changes the way we actually view the world and the way we interact with it. There is always so much more to a story than what we can pick up from one word, or what we can pick up from a short label or a descriptor that's not helpful. I think that once we begin sharing stories in a different way with ourselves as well as with others, that we can change the way that our community interacts with each other. And it has to start somewhere, so it has to start with us. It has to start with me. So that's that. I just wanted to share a little bit and explain the story rewrite. And I want to pick this up in the future and share a little more about my thinking regarding our stories. Maybe I'll be able to do that a little bit on different topics and carry the conversation a little further. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you're taking care, and I hope you're doing things for self-care every day. See you next time. Bye-bye.